I grew up on Cape Cod. I didn't initially think that I wanted to come back to Cape, but after graduating from school, my family is still here and there are great work opportunities out here, so ultimately that's what brought me back.
I always told myself that I'd be happy no matter where I'm living as long as it's close to the ocean. And when I first came down here, I did find things to be limiting, and it was hard to get going. My first 2 or 3 years down here, I thought that eventually I was going to turn around and go back off Cape. But I kind of sowed my roots, and one thing kind of naturally led to another with my job and finding this house, and things just kind of came together naturally. And the longer, every day that I'm here, I find myself loving the decision that I made to stay and live and thrive down here. So
I love the community here because the community is really aware of the beautiful place that we live in, and so they're really aware and conscious of their environment, and that's really important to me. And they're also really conscious of being friendly to their neighbors and helping each other out. And you don't always find that in towns anymore. And you really find that commitment to the environment and to their neighbors in all 15 towns on the Cape. And I think that that's really special.
The biggest frustration, I would say, besides the cost, is not having a central place to go and find housing. A lot of times I'd end up on Craigslist and not always feel super confident with that decision. I will say that I've found a lot of really great housing on Craigslist, but a lot of it tends to be winter rentals or summer rentals, or just not ideal locations. So I would always struggle with where do I go to find apartments, and you'd always end up having to search at least a half a dozen different sites.
Well, since my family was here when I got out of school, I first lived at their house because, of course, they opened their doors. After a few months there, as any graduate kind of gets tired of living at home, I decided to start scouting around and looked around for a few months, ended up living at my friend's place where they had an extra room, which was seasonal rental, and was consistently looking for a year-round apartment. That took another few more months, and finally, after I'd say about 6 months of searching for an apartment, I was finally able to find a year-round rental through Craigslist, which was ultimately not successful, and it ended up being through word of mouth.
I looked on Craigslist mostly, and looking on Craigslist for an apartment is kind of like getting concert tickets, where I would get to work, I would open up the Craigslist website, and I would continually refresh it almost every 10 minutes because apartments go away within, or they're taken within, an hour of being on Craigslist.
Before my home, I actually kind of floated around a little bit. When I first came to the Cape about 10 years ago, I lived with family, and then made some new friends, and then moved in with a friend who had purchased a home many years prior with the help of her parents. And then finally, after doing that for many years, was able to purchase my home.
Craigslist was one of the tools that I used. Family reaching out through friends, pre-existing networks. But what I found was that there were very few actual online tools that I could use as opposed to when you're in the city, something like that. So I'd say the most successful route was through friends and family.
I was going to say number one is affordability. But besides that, yes, it was neighborhood, it was size of the house. Didn't want something that was a cottage, but also didn't want a 4-bedroom Cape. That was too much for me at the time. So, more than anything else, it was really location. I wanted to be in a nice neighborhood. I didn't mind buying a dumpy house in a nice neighborhood, and that's kind of what I ended up doing, actually.
for multiple reasons, I like the tiny house movement. The first and foremost, I think, just because we have so much as Americans, and sometimes I think we have too much. There are a lot of benefits to living smaller, being able to purge your life of the excess, and it's just more affordable as well. A lot of times you can save up to purchase a house that has less square footage but is still sufficient to live in. I think sometimes we forget that we don't need a ton of space, and especially someone who is active and outdoors a lot or spends a lot of time at the office, where your home is really kind of more of a place to sleep, to go back and sleep. It just makes sense. It makes sense for me. So that is my dream house. Tiny house, exposed brick wall, spiral staircase, maybe a barn door, you know. The ideal neighborhood. I am a Lower Cape girl. I grew up on the Lower Cape, so I love that area. But I guess hypothetically, I would love to be able to live in community. I know I've tossed around the idea with some friends who also are on the tiny house movement train of pitching in our money and buying a property and putting up our little tiny houses. That's not really a huge possibility at this stage because it's hard to find those locations on the Cape that are still affordable or that are zoned correctly. So, but yeah, I think it would be really beneficial to be able to live almost taking it beyond the apartment complex, because then you don't have to worry about sharing walls or any of that. You still have your own property, your own space that you own, and you have that pride in that ownership, but you're still living in that community.
I want it to be in a safe place in terms of location. Of course, being on Cape Cod, everything is a bit close to the water, but I've been spoiled in living with beautiful areas that you could bike to the water or something like that. That's ideally, I would like green features as well. If it was a house that had solar panels or something like that, that would be incredible, but not something I necessarily would mandate, because I know it brings the pool down even smaller and smaller of the affordable houses that would be in my price range.
My ideal apartment is something that's small and simple and in a safe community or safe place, and also somewhere where I really enjoy the neighbors that I have. And just really basic stuff, nothing too fancy, you know, a refrigerator, a stove, a kitchen, a bedroom, a shower that I can stand up in, just really the basics. And it can be small, that would work for me. My dream house is definitely on Cape Cod. I would like to be here. I love it here, so I want to stay. My dream house would be something that's small, that I could have, you know, an extra bedroom for my family to come visit, maybe a little bit of a yard, and where I could walk to the beach. I don't necessarily want to live at the coast, but I'd like to be able to walk to the beach and enjoy it whenever I'd like to.
I would have certain requirements that I would want when looking for a house, but to be honest, that question isn't even something that I could foresee happening or finding a house for at least another few years, in terms of how expensive it is on Cape Cod and how much I make.
I did some of those calculations when I was first looking. So I work in public service, and so I'm a scientist, so I wanted to be very calculated, very linear about the way that I did my budget. And so 30% of my salary is a decent amount for a place on the Cape, except I would get there to those apartments that I could afford, and they were, like I just described, not quite meeting my expectations, or in a really unsafe neighborhood. I live by myself, so safety is definitely very important to me. And what I ended up doing was realizing that I need to boost the amount of money that I spend per month, and the only way for me to really do that is to work 2 to 3 jobs in order to afford to live on the Cape.
They live in a variety of different types of housing. A lot of them are actually in seasonal housing, meaning they are in a place in the summer months that has relatively high rent. Sometimes it's week by week, and then at the end of the summer they go into a more affordable seasonal rental that will be in the autumn months and in the winter months, and then they have to do the same game more or less again going into the summer rental, winter rental rotation. Others live at home with family. I know a few 25, 26-year-old that are still at home, and the very few are in a situation such as myself where they're in affordable year-round housing.
Rentals are not affordable on Cape Cod. Unfortunately, for anyone working in a minimum wage job is going to be hard pressed to find something affordable. Even for people who are above the minimum wage level, I think I would say it's hard to find something under $1,000 a month. A one bedroom as a single person moving into a place, it gets challenging when you add on top of that utilities and renters insurance and all of the other living expenses that you have to take into account on a single income can be challenging. So I think a lot of people tend to get pigeonholed into trying to find a roommate, or if you're in a relationship, you can get a place together.
I guess the biggest frustration is that, they being in the insurance business, I get asked, where are people buying homes? Where are people our age able to purchase and afford? And, there's only a few places that, come to mind right off the top of my head on Cape Cod. And it's not the lower Cape, it's the mid and upper Cape where there's properties available. And again, they tend to be off the beaten path, not close to a lot of amenities and buses and other services. So, when you're talking about, where to buy, I think that's the biggest question is where do you buy? And it's hard to refer and say, I know lots of people selling homes, but unless you're coming in with a boatload of money, it's tough. It's really tough.
Find a network of friends that are going to be active in the house hunt with you, especially if you're going straight for a rental. I would suggest looking for a double or triple. It's very difficult to find single apartments on Cape Cod, so in 4 bedrooms, difficult too. So 2 to 3 seems to be where the niche was for us when looking. Get word out to friends and family that have networks in the community, whether that be your grandmother, your brother, or your parents. And be patient. That's really the thing about it. It'll come, but it's not going to be an easy process. And just don't be fearful of living in couch surfing more or less for a little bit of time, because ultimately, what are your other options except accepting the help that's given to you and not letting your pride take too much of a toll on your house search?
I think I'd give them 2 pieces of advice. One is to go on Craigslist and to be on Craigslist for a crazy amount of time, like constantly refreshing, always being on the ball, looking for apartments and calling immediately. And also to start to build a network of real estate agents, of business professionals, because you never know when someone will know of an apartment that opened up or know of a friend, because there's really no place where we can go to look for apartments. It's either through word of mouth or through Craigslist is what our options are.
I would change it so that affordable housing, I understand why there's as many rules in place, but I would make it more manageable. I would put more types of affordable housing, different types of units up, so whether they be for a family or for somebody who's just looking for a place to stay for a few years so you're not locked into that sort of situation. I would make it so that there would be some sort of program for people who do own houses in the area where it's feasible for them to actually rent year-round, as opposed to making it in the summer months when they can make the most money. They do weekly, and then they want locals to take their house in the wintertime when they can get monthly rent, and then they boot them out in the summer because that's when they can make the most affordable or make the most money in their housing. And so just, I don't know what the answer is for that type of program, but I know that if there was an incentive for people to do that who actually do own houses on Cape Cod who don't live here, that would be an amazing thing. And also, you drive around Cape Cod and there are so many houses in the winter that are not taken. They're just sitting idle. And people come to Cape, they live in them maybe 1 month, 1 week, 2 weeks, and it was almost painful when I was looking for a house to drive by and see all of those homes and think I could be living there. And I would totally live on my parents' house, at my parents' house on their couch for a week if they wanted to come down. You know, some sort of program linking all the different people on Cape Cod, whether they be here for 1 week or whether they be living here year-round in a different house.
Property owners understand those struggles and to be able to price their properties more affordably. I also think, I don't know, maybe a little more collaboration. Just again, if there was that spot where you could go online that has, so you don't have to be scouring website after website. If it was more of a, okay, this is your one-stop shop and you can find summer rentals and winter rentals and year-round rentals, and maybe there's even a roommate finder that is a little more vetted than Craigslist. But yeah, so that, I guess those would be positive steps. It would also be nice to see, I don't know, maybe some of the zoning start to change to enable that tiny house movement start to come more to the Cape, because I know that's been a little bit of an issue as far as, you know, water hookups and having to have a certain amount of square footage for properties. And I'm not an expert in this, so please don't quote me.
I think that if I had a magic wand, I would come up with some sort of innovative program to maybe subsidize some of the rent costs for young people, just temporarily as they're getting started and moving into buying a place. But I would also, you know, like put together a young person with an established person in the community that may or may not be in real estate, but could help that young person navigate some of the challenges of renting a property, or also help that person grow into buying a home and being a sounding board for some of the conflicts and challenges that arise with buying a home.
Well, it comes down to availability, number one. That's the big thing. Make more homes available. You know, the seasonal market kind of overtakes everything, and to open doors to more, what's the word I'm looking for? To your everyday Joe, to open doors for them to purchase homes. And even the rental market itself is extremely limited. Just to have some of these seasonal places open up to being year-round rental situations, that would make a world of difference. And I think it would also expand into encouraging and allowing younger people to live and thrive down here. That's one of the big issues is housing. Where do I live? If I want to work here, never mind finding a job, where would I even live? So it starts there.